Dr. Swine, Dr. Tripathi and others, and all those who have taken time out on this Wednesday morning to listen to a very boring talk. But before I begin, I'm greatly honored beyond words to be invited to deliver this second Dr. Basudev Memorial Lecture. It is a completely undeserved honor, and I hope I will be able to repay the trust that you have reposed in me in talking about issues which are close to the work of the Center for Translation and Digital Humanities, who are hosting this event. So, without further ado, let me give you a little roadmap for what I wish to talk about. Though I teach in the English department at Jadavpur University, I look after an interdisciplinary school called the School of Cultural Texts and Studies, which in fact turned 20 last week. So we had a celebration of sorts. But it is also, I will be talking about the work of the school, but try and, because the 20 years in its life is more or less congruent with the rise of digital humanities in India. So many of the challenges that we have faced might be relevant to similar work elsewhere, and especially with the kindred organizations like the Center, for instance, which are engaged in the same kind of work, to endeavors very close to my heart personally, translation as well as digital humanities. But I'm also going to talk about the humanities part of this endeavor. As Professor Shamanta pointed out, it's very difficult now to talk in rigid disciplinary boundaries about the humanities, the sciences, and technology. And one of the boons, I suppose, of digital humanities has been this opportunity given to us, those who work in the humanities, to work closely with, let us say, scientists or those who work in technology. So interdisciplinarity, which is now a buzzword in higher education, can only become meaningful when these kind of boundary crossings, these kind of collaborations between hitherto distinct fields becomes possible. And digital humanities is in fact one area where this has become possible. And therefore I think there is a great deal of merit in the thought that these discussions should perhaps also engage scientists and engineers, especially computer and that. Yeah, can you hear me at the back, or is it? It's all right. So now let me start with a slightly this picture. As you see, I'll scroll through the first 4 images. Now this was an installation which was recently seen in Calcutta in October 2023 on occasion of the Durga Puja. You know that on Durga Puja Calcutta is particularly notable for its creativity in creating pandals. But in this particular case, they had created something which is unusual, and that is the little magazine library of Shondip Dotto. Now, Shondip Dotto, who passed away recently, was a one-man archivist who created alone one of the biggest archives of little magazines. You know what little magazines are. Small, non-corporate, non-large publishing house, non-institutional magazines, primarily in Bengali, but also in Hindi, Oriya, English, Ami, and so on and forth. So, nearly 80,000 items, and this is the Pandal's entry, which tries to replicate the small 2.5 rooms in College Street which the little magazine library occupies. And here you see what the library actually looks like. This is the condition in which the 80,000 odd journals are kept. They are stacked from floor to roof. They are not organized according to issue or number or periodical, but according to subject matter. So if you're looking for agriculture in Midnapur district, you go to a certain shelf. Now, where was this is there a catalogue? It was all in the head of Jadavpur. If, as a researcher, you would go and tell him that you're looking for works or a magazine on peasant uprisings in the early 20th century, he would tell you go to that shelf. However, so there's the last of these slides. However, he was also very resistant to the idea of digitization. There was an attempt to digitize first catalog and then digitize some of this material. There was some of it was also put up online, but I believe that when Jadavpur found out that full texts of these journals were being uploaded online, he put a stop to this project, and the fear was that the importance of his physical collection would diminish if this was put up online. Now, of course, you can see how this argument works both ways. There's a question of custodianship, curation, which was all his work alone, outside the support of any institute or any funding body. But after his passing, his family became concerned about what would happen to these collections. Usually these collections they need full-time care. There is a trust which looks after the collection, but it has obviously has its limitations. It cannot make it openly available for researchers at all times. So the school has been approached to digitize this collection, and we have applied for funding under this project and hope that you can realize that this project on this scale, 80,000 journals, and before even one page can be digitized, one has to create a catalog, a finding list. It's a mammoth task. But I suppose a worthy task for any body which is interested in preserving our cultural heritage. So I start with this example as a kind of a very current and live example of also the certain kinds of challenges which, this is not yet what we might call a vulnerable archive. It is still in good condition. But as anyone who has gone to College Street, where this is housed, you will know that in the rainy season they have 3 feet of water almost, after 1 hour of rainfall. This is on the ground floor. So there is clear and constant threat to this kind of material. And in a sense, this is one of the things that Digital Humanities does and can do, but this is not the only thing that we do. So in this lecture, I will talk about some examples, talk through means of examples. But it is also important that such archives become accessible. You see, archives are always associated with some dusty room in some corner of a library repository where no one goes, no one looks after them. Now, when an archive is digitized, an archive only becomes an archive when people inquire after it, work on it, study it, and publish on it. And therefore, it has to be responsive to the needs and interests of non-academic public as well. It cannot only be restricted to academia. Now, this example of the Puja Pandal I showed is a remarkable example of public engagement with an archive. It's almost public art, and it's also very public. Millions of people saw it. Those people who had no idea that there was such a library of little magazines suddenly became aware of the existence of this. And this was a remarkable instance of an organizer of a Puja Pandal suddenly thinking of this and saying, okay, this is the way. The Puja Pandal does not necessarily have to resemble the Vatican or the Hagia Sophia or Hogwarts, as capital Puja Pandals do. It can also be a small library. So, in talking about the public face of Digital Humanities, we also get an opportunity to think about the nature of the public. Is there one public? How one might identify plurality of publics as potential stakeholders in both the generation and consumption of archival knowledge. Who produces archival knowledge? Is it only the universities, only the libraries? Or can the public, can an individual also be a producer of archival knowledge? A third strand which one may discuss are the possible linkages between the official curriculum of the higher education institutes and the production of archival knowledge. Again, is there a relationship between the production of the archive and classroom teaching? Are there courses? Is it part of the syllabus under the older system or current NAP. So these are the points I will touch upon. Now let me talk a bit about the school. Now I'm moving on to the PowerPoint. I think I may need a little here. PowerPoint, right? PDF. Thank you very much. So I will talk a little bit about the school. Now it was in 2003 this center came into being as you know, in Ravenshaw University as elsewhere. I think you have these departments which are teaching bodies, and then there are centers or schools which are research hubs. So at Jadavpur you have departments, schools and centers. So these schools, and I think for the first time in Indian higher, the HEIs, in Jadavpur came into being in the late 90s and early 2000s, giving an opportunity to scholars to break out of traditional disciplinary silos and create interdisciplinary research hubs which were not subject to the usual bureaucracies of academia. So in this context, therefore, we look at this. So when SCTR came into being, the school, in 2003, why did it come into being? Why did we suddenly decide that we need to have this kind of a school? The reason was that the university had acquired a number of documents, archives, paper archives, by some of the founders of the university. For instance, the poet Basudev was the critic, poet, scholar, Sudhindranath Dotto, the great poet, and his spouse, Rajeshwari Dotto, the musicologist, very inherited trunks and trunks full of material. And what does one do with them? Either you put it in the central library, where they will be looked after, but they will be in a trunk and nobody will ever come and inquire after them, or you digitize. So we started out of a need to digitize this material, but also a second impulse was that as a new university, now Jadavpur was established in 1955. Here, the English department here is over 100 years old, but though there was a previous avatar to Jadavpur University in the shape of the National Council of Education, which came into being during 1905, during this upsurge, the Swadesh, the Bongo movement, which sought to partition Bengal for administrative reasons. At that time, the National Council of Education was formed to provide an alternative seat of higher learning, alternative to what the Presidency University, Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras. So, as a result, the university itself came into being later, and we do not really have that kind of wealth of manuscripts or older material that a Calcutta University might have. In other words, we were not able to provide resources for research to students in the, particularly in humanities, primary sources for which they would have to go abroad or elsewhere. So another impulse behind this was to create such archives on site. Now, the question of funding is always a very important one. Where does the money come from? Because digitization is something which requires equipment, which requires human resources and trained human resources. So again, this was the period of funding where the money was available from the University Grants Commission, UGC. In other words, public funding was available. Many of you, especially faculty members, will remember the university, the major research projects which have now been discontinued, or the University with Potential for Excellence project of the UGC in 2005, of which, out of that money, the school came into being. The reason I'm talking about funding is because this is an inescapable part of this narrative. You cannot create digital archives or cannot do work without money. And in a sense, we have also, I don't know, perhaps not here in this part of the world, but certainly in West Bengal, as a public state university, we have seen a steady shrinking of funds, both from the center and the state. I'm not going to go into the reasons. Part of them are part of general policy, part of them is political. But we have found that there has been a kind of a very three stages in this short history. First, money from public funding from the UGC, then a period of private funding, the Ratan Tata Memorial Trust, the Endangered Archives Program of the British Library, and now finally crowdfunding. So we are really now, asking our alumni, Some of our projects are being sustained entirely by alumni funding, which is again a kind of a new phase. I mean, I'm not saying that the other sources of funding have dried up. This is something which I ask you to keep in mind. There's a fourth source of funding that is making your own money, monetizing some of this material, but since we are a public university, we do not do that. Everything that we produce out of our research is available to consult free. This is essentially an article of our field. Now, at this time, early 20th century, digitization, and you must remember that digitization and digital humanities are two different things. Digital humanities are rather, it's an approach, it's a conceptual framework, and it's also escape, it's also technology. One of which is digitization. But digitization became kind of a flavor of the month during the early 20th century when everyone began to digitize their own holdings. So one very good example in the case state of West Bengal was the West Bengal Public Library Network, DSpace, where the entire library network, state libraries, began to digitize their collections and put them up online. Now these have now become part of the Digital Library of India corpus. At that time, we found that these were done in very low resolution. It was not very satisfactory. And also, let us say if you have one book, it was split up into 3 or 4 parts. So the first 10 pages would be one file, next 50 pages another file. The reason was that this was, internet bandwidths were not very high. I mean, we're talking about 2003-04, data plans were expensive. So they deliberately made smaller files so that people could download on their phones. A larger file size would make it inaccessible. So while the digitization was of low resolution, like 100 dpi or whatever, the thought behind it was laudable. It was praiseworthy that you wanted it to. But as a research tool, you really could not use it very effectively. It wasn't really. But these were happening. And then also, along with these players, there were quasi-governmental initiatives. So Rochelle Pinto, who runs this Archives for Access, this website, she's written recently, in the field of pedagogy, digital technology provided some control from the intense, provided some relief from the intense control around intellectual resources through the gradual unrolling of quasi-state university initiatives such as the InfluNet, Delnet and Shodhganga. Shodhganga, as you know, is a very, very useful resource, which whatever their technical drawbacks were distinct signs that projects of scale were conceived and implemented with visible success by government and quasi-government institutions. And this was a time of, I'm talking about the first decade of the 20th century, fairly energetic activities in the field of digitization, of which this is one. Now this is an example of, again, a state-funded project, excuse me. So this was commissioned to the School of Cultural Texts and Records in the 150th sesquicentennial birth anniversary of Rabindranath Tagore to create an online variorum comprising all of Tagore's literary works in Bengali and English. We digitized to begin with 47,000 manuscript pages and 91,000 printed pages, but with transcription, search and collation engine. Now let me so what was done is, let us say you have a particular novel which has 3 or 4 editions. First it comes out in a periodical or magazine, or let's say a short story. Then it comes out in book form. Then it comes out as a complete, the Rabindra Rachanavali, the complete works. So there are, and very often there are differences between these versions, these editions. Tagore constantly revised his own work. So the first part of the task was to locate, which was not difficult, then digitize these multiple printed versions of the same work. The second was to access and digitize corresponding manuscripts, which was not that easy. Tagore's manuscripts are held by Rabindra Bhavan in Vishwabharati University, which was a central university, and therefore they were on board with this project, and they very generously gave almost all their manuscripts. Still at the very last moment they had, I think, second thoughts and said, okay, we have given away everything, we should stop. And they didn't give us the entire thing. Anyway, so all of them, this had to be transcribed. You see, there was no way to OCR, many of you will be familiar with this term, OCR, the optical character recognition software. which renders image files as text files, which is why you can search with words files. It works on Google Book. When you search, let us say you go to Google, you search, you put in a search string, and it will search the text. But this is very difficult to do with Indic script. The reason behind that is, as opposed to the Roman script, which is 26 letters max, 8 or 10, 9, 10 numerals, a few punctuation marks. Indic script has vowels, has consonants, and has conjoints and vowel endings. It has 250, 300 character length. So it is very difficult for an OCR. It has to do much more work, the artificial intelligence, to recognize that software. It is an AI is a pattern recognition software. So you have to train the AI. And also, because of irregularities in typography, that is to say in printing font, if you print from metal font, in most Indian languages before 1850, it is typography is irregular, even spelling, that is to say orthography is irregular. So not only does the OCR have to learn to recognize 250 odd characters, it also has to be trained to recognize variants of it before the type becomes standardized. So before 1850, it finds it very difficult to recognize software. So in 2011, Bengali or any indexed OCR was almost in its infancy. Now there is some degree of success. Again, varying across Indian languages. We were just having this discussion before this paper. So in Bengali, for instance, Google Doc. So you can do this at home. Scan any page of Korea text as an image, JPEG. Put that JPEG into Google Drive. Right click and open with Google Doc. It should be able to do an OCR, and then you can see how good or how bad the OCR is. 2% error is bad because that is one error every 2 lines. Let us say every line has 50 characters, including spaces and letters. 1% error is an error every 2 lines, okay? Which is just about what we can tolerate. So you need a minimum 99% accuracy in whatever was here. So as a result of, when this project was done in 2011, there was no OCR, so everything had to be keyed in by hand. So you're looking at a team of 30 people who are sitting down and double keying, so the errors, so one text would be keyed in by 2 people and then compared so that to reduce errors. But that was, I'm not going to go into details of it, that was one aspect of this project, which if you on our phones, if you go to Vichitra and just see yourself, you can test. The other aspect was the creation of something called a collation software. What is that? Software which will give you immediately compare 3 or 4 texts and give you the differences. So let us say if there are 4 versions of a poem, you run the software and it will show you where there are differences, which word has been changed, which word has been cut out. So that again is a resource which is only available in 1 or 2 or 3 languages in the world. So this was what Vichitra was doing. So Vichitra was an example of, on the one hand, very raw, heavy digitization, but also the creation of digital software and tools to work on them. And these 2 processes can go hand in hand. And there we had to work very closely with the computer science department of the university, who wrote the code. You'll be interested to know that all the people who worked in this project were under the age of 30. All of them trained in Indian universities. So this was a project entirely executed by young people, part of the Indian education system, and all under the age of 30. So which is, again, of course, younger people are much better with digital tools, we know that. So there are 1 or 2 projects more which I want to draw your attention to. So this is another kind of archiving, the music archive. Now this is something which many of you will perhaps be interested in. It's an archive of recorded North Indian classical music. One of the biggest in the world, about 6,500 hours of analog media such as spools, vinyls, shellac, tape. These are all pre-digital media of sound. Now, the other interesting feature about this particular collection is that almost all of it is unpublished material. Now, what do I mean by that? When you think of published material, you think of records which are either 33 RPM, 45 RPM, or 78 RPM. Now the longest playing time is the 33 RPM, but that too is not more than 18 or 19 minutes on one side. Now your typical Hindustani classical music concert goes on for hours. So much of this collection is actually private recordings. So let us say Mallikarjun Mansur, Baraigulam Ali Khan Sahab, doing a recital in somebody's home, and that particular place, like those, bootleg videos which turn up on YouTube now, rock concerts, the entire. So these are absolutely gold as far as the commercial value is concerned. They have now never been published. They belong only to collectors, and those collectors also began to face difficulties in preserving this material. So they gave it to us, lent to us. We made digital copies out of them, returned the tapes, the spools, the whatever it is, and kept a copy for ourselves and gave them a copy. Now see, but there is no way we can put this online, because all of this is protected by double copyright. One is the copy owner, the physical owner of the owner of the physical medium itself, the spool, the record, the vinyl. The other is the intellectual creator. So these two things militate against putting any sound or any modern sound archive, sound recording, and most sound recording is modern, online. So this is a very different kind of archive where you have to come and listen to it yourself. We cannot put it up online. We can give you the metadata, but we cannot put it up online. And these collections strongly reflect personal tastes. Now some collectors spend their lives collecting the work of individual artists or particular styles of music. Many collectors build up large personal collections, battling against the difficulties of locating, acquiring, documenting, and preserving records and recordings, working entirely out of a commitment to the preservation of music, and with no external means of support. They have often made these recordings available to serious listeners. Collectors are, however, now finding these collections difficult to maintain and have welcomed the possibility of digitization. A full set of digital copies would be given to the owners of the collections so that, and this is another aspect, they are able to listen to the collection without further compromising the original material, which you perhaps don't want to play over and over again. This may also be the last chance to access the work of a whole range of artists who were never recorded in their lifetime. You see, recording is also, whether it's All India Radio or Indian Gramophone Company or Columbia, there are many artists who never got recorded in their lifetimes. Their only recordings are in private hands, or in some cases posthumous recordings commercially released from private recordings. In fact, a very large body of music exists only in private collections, and whatever knowledge about these musicians exists is on the basis of the limited circulation of these private recordings. As you can see, this again raises questions about the private-public nature of such archives. I mean, it's kind of a paradox. We are private collectors approaching a public institution to digitize material which will nevertheless continue to remain private. Which again, there are all these questions. Sound is a particularly difficult area to work in. We have recently had a request from IIT, one of the IITs, to lend them some of their ragas so that they can run it through computational software which will analyze the Paraj Basanta Rag. Now again, we have to obtain permission from the actual owners before these files could be given to the IIT concerned. Because again, this is being used for scholarly work, and this is therefore governed by those terms and conditions. So this is, I'm coming to this later, but text archives are the ones which we have some experience in. So these are two kinds of material. In some cases we have only manuscripts, and we have original manuscripts with digital copies. These figures are mainly figures from Bengali modernity. Some are poets. Jivananand Das, Tapan Sinha was a filmmaker whose 100th centenary is this year. Shakti Chattopadhyay, arguably the greatest poet of the 20th century in Bengali language. Shankar Chaudhary, the sculptor. Ramesh Majumdar, the historian. Digen Gupta, filmmaker. Shoibal Gupta, public civil servant, and so on and forth. Here you have other kinds of Basudev, author and critic, Desh, famous Bengali literary journal, Adol Sarkar, theatre person, inventor of third theatre, Arun Kumar Sarkar, poet, journals, Kobita and Chaturanga, select manuscripts from the historical Sanskrit college, and then other kinds of small and larger. For example, if you look at the last one on the right hand side, Ravi Dayal was the publisher of Amitabh Ghosh's early novels. He was a publisher who worked for Oxford University Press all his life, then took retirement and founded a very small artisanal press of his own, which in fact introduced Amitabh Ghosh and other writers to the world. So he gave us some of, his wife gave us some of his papers. It's not a complete archive, but copy-edited manuscripts of Ghosh's early novels, The Circle of Reason and Shadow Lines. So these are archives which we comprise the cultural modernity in Bengal. Some of these have been made over the entirety to the SCTR, while others have been loaned for digitization and then returned to the owners. Now, and in these cases, these are, some are done with funding, some we do just out of, it's a small archive. As late as last week, I was given 7 manuscripts, handwritten manuscripts of short stories by the great Bengali humorist, translator of the Mahabharata, a chemist by profession, and a designer of the linotype called Rajshekhar Basu or Poroshura. He wrote under the pseudonym Prof. He's a very funny writer. His elder brother Kirindra Bose was the founder of the Indian Psychoanalytical Society, father of Indian psychoanalysis. So 7 of his stories in manuscript form, meant for publication in a particular journal, was given to us by the family of the editor of that journal. So these are very small things, but you have to, you don't really write a funding proposal for this, you do it out of your own resources. Or currently, you will be interested, we have begun to work with sports archiving. The very famous Indian hockey player, Gurbakh Singh, who won gold medal for us in 1956, a silver in 60, I forget, but at least three hockey medals, are the last remaining representatives of the golden age of Indian hockey. He's in his late 80s, but has total recall, has a very sharp mind, has asked us to digitize his papers. And in his case, Gurbakh is the only one who can tell us that in one photograph who is there from left to right. Okay, who knows? He's the only one who remembers. And he says that I've collected, these people call me a hoarder, but I've collected everything. And his collection is extraordinary. It's not just newspapers, posters, photographs. He has medals, boots, hockey sticks. I have myself handled Gurbakh's hockey stick in my own hand. It's an honor. The hockey stick that they used at that time, you'll be particularly interested because Orissa is really loud. The hockey is a major. And in fact, we have been in touch with some of the hockey people here also to further take this project forward. So you have hockey sticks, balls, official balls which were used in the Olympic Games, blazers, medals, and we can also do 3D digitization. It takes a lot of time. How does one digitize 3-dimensional objects? There is, for those of you interested, you can go on, there's a software called photogrammetry. There are quite a few software. It's very labor intensive. It will take 250 to 300 photographs of the same object from different angles. So you need to have a rotating camera which will photograph it, and then the software will use it. So we are not doing that because for Gurbakh's collection, but we might do it in a second phase. So these collections are now also becoming, for example, Leander Pace's family. His father, Pace Pace, was also an Olympian. He played hockey with Gurbakh. Mother Jennifer Pace was also an Olympian. So you have 3 Olympians in one family with tons of material. All kinds of material, and much of it is from the analog age. A video cassette, a tape, Gurbakh even has material. He told us that after the 56 or 60 Olympics, after the final march past, and you're not supposed to do this, the Indian flag was lying around in the dressing room. You're not supposed to have a flag, no one was taking it. I think they had lost in hockey that year, so everyone was very disappointed. So Gurbakh packed the flag and brought it with him. So he actually has the Indian flag from the 1960 march past, the final ceremony at Olympics. So this is the I'm a hoarder, I collect things. This is the way he collected things. So that material is now there. So you have to not only digitize it, you have to also write the story behind it. It's not just a random flag, it's something which was displayed by the Indian contingent at this Olympics and then discarded, then found by someone, brought back. So there is a whole story there. The stories about balls, the stories about hockey sticks. So part of the task of digitization is also to, in a sense, uncover these stories, which always digitization metadata cannot tell you. You also have to have interviews. And so this is a new model for us, where we are working closely with Goodbucks to create a new kind of archive, sports archive. Now, of course, this is not a new archive. There are, if you go to museums, hockey museums, you will find sport archives. But this is something new for us. The other major project that I wanted to draw your attention to is something you will, is also a possible 2 centuries of Indian print. Now, this is something which just came to an end last year. You see, the British Library in London has one of the largest collections of South Asian printing materials in the world. So, especially till about 1940s or so, there are many items, printed items in the British Library collection which cannot be found in any Indian library. Particularly the ones which are thin or which have small number of pages. So what we might call pamphlets or popular chapbooks. These are difficult to preserve in Indian climatic conditions, and they have fallen to pieces or they have not been kept, but the British Library has them. So we started a project in 2016 called 2 Centuries of Indian Print to digitize unique South Asian material in the collection of British Library. We started with Bengali, but we also did a lot of Odia, Urdu, Sylheti and Assamese. We started with Bengali because there was a pre-existing Bengali bibliographical project which allowed us to advise the British Library. Here you see the short title catalogue, a full bibliographical record of Bengali works from the 1800 to 1867 period. So we knew exactly which libraries had which copies, which were unique, which were in bad condition. So we were able to tell the British Library, in your collection, these 2,000 or 1,500 titles are unique, so you should digitize them. That is how they were prioritized. So, you will find all of these as open access. If you go on the British Library website, if you click 2 Centuries of Indian Print, you will get these 2,000 odd South Asian titles, which are all available for free download. The whole objective of this project was to first digitize and then upload. This is a slow process. The British Library actually digitized more than 10,000 but uploaded only 2,000 because this takes time. Of course, if you now go on the British Library website, you might not find it because they have been reeling under a cyber attack for the last 2 months. There's a Russian ransomware virus which has completely destroyed brought the British Library's system to its knees, which is also another danger of digital technology. You see, one of the things which we often discuss is, if we have a digital copy, do we need to preserve the hard copy? Yes, we do. The forces that play against digital archive, there may be hard disk crashes, there may be acts of nature, there may be cyber attacks such as British Library is one of the biggest libraries in the world. If they are subject to a cyber attack of such a crippling kind, no one is safe. So, literally for 2 months, the library the online presence has shut down. So, digital archives are subject to various predictable and unpredictable forces. Also, there is this obsolescence of technology. Earlier, we had microform or microfilm. We thought, okay, this was a solution. Suddenly, digital technology came over. So, you have to transfer all that microfilm data to the digital format. Digital technology goes out of date very quickly. So, in order to transfer a set of data from one platform to another, and the upkeep and maintenance of data is also a challenge. You may stop paying the fees of that website. The website goes down. The paper copy never disappears. It stays unless there's a fire or some flood. But your digital archive may disappear. So it is at the same time the preservation of the paper copy is also important, in so much as it is possible. Now, of course, you need climate control. You need special treatment for paper. Not always possible or feasible or affordable. But one should try as much as possible to preserve the origin. Here you see some more examples of smaller projects. These are other. So one more project which I want to talk about in a little bit, couple of minutes, is this project called Shabda Kalpo. Again, another example of the use of digital tools. Now, what is Shabda Kalpo? This ongoing project claims to create a historical dictionary of the Bengali language and involves a complex and advanced computer program on one hand, on the other, highly skilled and labor-intensive human analysis. The project so far has compiled as large a database as possible of Bengali texts of all kinds on all subjects, and the software can now create a table of all forms of verb with the same basis. So that means, let's say you want to see how a particular verb or a particular noun, how the evolution of its meaning, how its meaning has changed. So let's say khabo, I eat. Khabo, khilam, khechi, khechilam, and the more formal form, khaite chilam, khaibo, khaiachi. Now, the database will search this and show you how this word, so let us say in 1805 printed text, the verb has appeared in a certain way. 100 years later it has appeared in a different way. So it can actually parse that corpus and show you the changes in meaning, show you the sentence, show you the word, show you the context. Think of a word called itihash. How has the word itihash changed? Obviously the way we use it now was not the same as it was when in 1802 Ram Boshu wrote a book called Raja Pratapaditya Charitra Itihash. That is a different itihash. So if that software shows you that change in meaning, this is what Shabda Kalpo is doing. But for that you need to feed it with, it's a very hungry program. It needs more and more digital printed material in OCR format. So this project is a potential and endless one. You can keep feeding it texts and it can keep giving you more and more detailed analysis of meanings. Again, worldwide only 2 other languages have this dictionary, the English and the Dutch. Again, this is also a project which is enormously expensive. You keep on, we constantly keep hiring. I mean, if you trespass in the general direction of SCTR, you'll be hired. They're hanging on, okay, come and do work on this, we'll pay you per entry, something like that. So, this is again the project of Professor Shubhata Chaudhary, who carried out the Digitisation project. This is what we are currently doing, one of the 3 things we are currently doing. The other project that we regularly do is the Endangered Archives program. Now, this is a project which is run by the British Library again, which gives funding for, as the name says, endangered archives. These are random examples: Sileti Nagari Test, popular market books, Baul song books, Shantali periodicals. So you identify a body of material which you think is endangered, you write a grant, you enter into the competition, and if your project is found. So this is administered in 2 ways. Again, I'm telling this for the benefit of anyone who wishes to apply for this grant. There are 2 aspects: Endangered Archives program and Modern Endangered Archives program. What is a modern endangered archive? Any kind of digital material, photographs, negatives, film, that's modern material, after 20th century. But these are also fragile, I mean, photographic negatives, all of this. So the Modern Endangered Archives program is administered by the University of California, Los Angeles, and the Endangered Archives program is administered by the British Library of London. Again, you'll ask, who gives the money for this? This is an organization called Arcadia. Arcadia made, I don't know a great deal about Arcadia. It made its money out of the Tetra Pak industry. Tetra Pak is ubiquitous all over the world. Every time, I suppose they make money every time anyone buys a Tetra Pak. Now you can imagine how profitable that is. However, their ambitions are also on a similar scale. If you look at the Arcadia website, their mission is to clean the world's oceans. Okay, so that is as ambitious as it gets. But more seriously, this is another project for which the school acts as a South Asian hub. So what we do is we conduct online as well as in-person seminars, webinars, etc., which teaches you the tools of archiving. So just look out, if anyone is interested, you can register for these, sometimes 1 day, sometimes 3 days webinars, as well as in-person seminars where you were taught different skills. So we recently did a 3-day sound preservation archive, which is perhaps very complicated, and it's for people who are interested in sound. So there are 3D objects, sound collections, and so on and forth. Now, after COVID, all of this work, when we talk about issues and challenges, COVID was also a very big challenge. We practically shut down. I mean, for 2 years, the building was closed. When we reopened, we had to restart everything from scratch. But we also, therefore, became aware that about the public nature of what we need to do. So we started to hold open days where we invited members of the archive to come and look at what we have and encourage them to create little home archives, maybe grandparents' letters or stamp albums. Everyone has this kind of material at home now. And they are, if not significant for society at large, at least there is a local significance. And each of this is part of a larger story of our shared heritage and culture. So how do you do that? I mean, we all do that. We all are archivists. We self-archive all the time. Our Facebook page, our Instagram feed, our Twitter are all archives. And just because we create them daily or write all kinds of rubbish on them does not make them any less of an archive. It is a constant process of self-archiving. And one day this question will arise, what will you do with all the photos? What will you do with your tweets? What will you do with your Instagram? Because this is also textual production. Of course, it's on different scale, in a different way. But we human beings are textual creatures. That is the difference between us and animals, perhaps, that we can narrativize. Our life is a narrative. And therefore, any text that we produce, consequently, we have to, at some point of time, think about its preservation, think about it. And you see, one of the things that I've realized is that, we are from a generation, people like us in our 50s, who have seen both sides, the digital and the analog. We started our life in the analog part of this, and then we went over to the digital part, but there's a gap in between. So till about 1990, when I look at my old papers, I have letters which I wrote to my friends and received from them. Those letters are preserved, many of them. From 2007, I started using Gmail. I have all my emails from 2007. Between 2007 and 1997, there is a blank. Because at that time, we used to use Hotmail or VSNL.com or VSNL.in, which have all gone, which we have not archived. I mean, a few of us have done it, people who are aware of this. But in most lives, there is a black hole of this kind. No correspondence, nothing, from a 10-year period. So this is another strange, this is an example of what happens when one technology switches over to the other. There are losses. There are files, hard disks which have crashed. There are files we do not have anymore. So this entire process of archiving digital material is even more challenging than archiving hard copy material. The hard copy is there, you can make a digital archive. But what about non-digital material? That is not easy to archive. Because they have different owners, different servers, different websites. Orkut, there used to be something called Orkut before Facebook. It's all gone. There's no archive, or at least there isn't any accessible to us. Of course, others will tell you that no data is ever truly lost. All data leaves a trace. There is a book, if you wish to read, there's a book by Matthew Kirshenbaum, one of the major digital historians of our time, called Mechanisms, Forensic Imagination and Digital Media, where he argues that contrary to popular belief, digital media is not that easily lost, and you really have to work very hard to erase digital data. And he gives the example of the United States Defense Department and their handbook, that if you want to destroy a hard disk, your best way is to go into the Pentagon car park and run a tank over it. Okay, now you don't have a tank handy at all times. The other thing is you put it in an magnetic MRI field, will bend the. So these are extreme measures, extreme inscriptions, one might say, or what Kirschenbaum calls the grammatology of the hard disk drive. He also gives this rather upsetting example from 9/11, the day the World Trade Centers fell down. You see, after the collapse of the Twin Towers, relatives of those who had perished in that attack had no signs of their, obviously no bodies were found, but people were, their office hard disk drives often could be found in the debris. Because the hard disk drive, like airplane's black box, is designed to be virtually indestructible. So in fact, there was a company which then specialized in restoring those hard disk drives which were found in the debris of Ground Zero, and give them to the relatives as a way of, as a kind of a remnant, last relic of the work the relatives were doing. And then there's a little conspiracy theory which then emerged around it, was that they suddenly found that just before the plane struck the Twin Towers, there was a sharp spike in credit card transactions through the WTC. But that, again, there are many such conspiracy theories which you will find on the internet, not to be taken seriously. But Kirschenbaum begins his book with this account and tells us that the hard disk is almost impossible to destroy, and that if you pay enough money, obviously that is important. Our hard disks crash all the time, and we don't have enough money to restore the data. I mean, my computer crashed 2 days ago, and but this morning the person who was working on it said, no, we have been able to recover all the D drive and E drive data. Not the C drive. So one should never say about C drive. I'm sure you know that. So the reason behind all these anecdotal anecdotes is that this is digitization, and our relationship with digital media is something we both encounter at everyday level as well as at a scholarly level. And the task is how can one create a conversations between our everyday use and our scholarly use. And I believe centers such as Translation and Digital Humanities or the School of Cultural Texts and Records are pioneers in that respect. We are trying to suggest new ways of scholarship, not just scholarship, but also non-academic kind of engagement with textual production. These are some more examples of work which we do for other stakeholders. For example, digitizing the Victoria Memorial Hall collection. We don't own these files ourselves. We just do it for them, or they are the custodians, and so on and forth. This is more detail if you want to. I'm interested. We are talking about the software programs developed with customized software for Bengali short title catalog, and these are some of our courses and online resources that you can see yourself. So, lastly, there is we have only, I think I've spent enough time thinking of this. Just take 2 more minutes. Lastly, there is the question of pedagogy, classroom teaching. How does one this translate into classroom teaching? Now, you know that in many places, we've already started a 4-year undergraduate program. The NEP has, in its wisdom, decided that the 3-year program is no longer feasible. So one of the things, so we have started a 4-year program this year. It's completely chaotic, but one good outcome of it has been that the first semester students in the English department are doing a course called Digital Humanities as something called CVAC, or what is it called? Vocational value-added course. So my department said, okay, what value-added courses shall we teach? So I said, okay, fine, we can do one on Digital Humanities. That's been entirely being taught by project fellows at Digital Humanities. Right now, as I speak, they're having a test. First internal, which is to OCR. They have been given a piece of text which they are supposed to OCR and transcribe. That's it. And he made it to me. So my mailbox is this full of now. But it's good that they're doing it in the first semester. Half of the class is very interested, half are not. That is usually the case. But this has given us an opportunity to introduce this at an early stage. I also anticipate more fallout from the NEP in 2 or 3 years' time when internships will become necessary. Already, colleges have started talking to SCT saying, will you take interns? Now, I'm looking to a time in 2 years now, we'll be swamped with hundreds of interns. Who knows what we're going to do with them. But yeah, on that note, thank you very much for your patience and for listening.